Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Weekly Emsights. I'm Corey Lagrange, Strategy Director here at Influence, and today we're going to talk a little bit about where are the leads. We know right now a lot of our typical lead funnels are starting to dry up or are just trickling in. So today we're going to talk about unconventional or differing places where we can find and cultivate leads and what that process might look like for you and your business. Of course, today I'm joined by a very special guest, my twin, my lookalike here at Influence, Search Director Dave Anderson. How's it doing this morning, Dave?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Good, good. If you remember, Dave has been on a few times before to talk about some timely things related to search, to analytics, to media, and all things in between. Today, we're going to talk about how you as a business can find leads and cultivate new relationships, new digital life cycles, and things like that. So, Dave, I know this is kind of a Pandora's box kind of topic because once you start talking about where we can find new relationships, where we can start cultivating new relationships and ultimately turn them into leads, it's kind of a nebulous concept, right? Especially with foot traffic starting to just trickle back in for a lot of location-based businesses. Web traffic, we're starting to be able to extrapolate some trends, from pre-COVID to COVID, height to now. What are some things that have been successful in the past that we can look back to and kind of apply that to where we are now so that we're really not starting from ground zero for every single thing?
I think that's a good question. There's definitely some kind of tried and true tactics that I think would still work now. One of the first and foremost that I would bring up is organic search and SEO. I think that's kind of a staple that needs to be in place in order to really drive quality, and not just in the short term, but as we look into like the issues with the pandemic and the ensuing recession that's likely to follow, that could be a really valuable thing for businesses to have in place and structured very well, because it can kind of keep your pipeline flowing even in down times. If you haven't spent any time focused on it lately, or maybe you need to circle back and look at is everything all buttoned up, that's probably a really good place to start in terms of, especially when you start to consider if recession budgets probably means slashed media budgets and slashing where you're spending your money to get people into your funnel. I think SEO is probably a good starting point. Beyond that, paid search and paid social are probably really good channels for you to focus on in terms of capturing leads. Just keeping in mind that your customer journey is likely changing a little bit for you. So things that you've done in the past that have been kind of quicker turnaround conversions, they might take a little longer. So you're going to need to be able to also be thinking about how you're nurturing those leads when they come in the door, and really building out a flow for that to keep them warm and to keep them ready when the time comes that they are ready to convert and become a customer, making sure you have that in place. So that probably means you're changing kind of some of the lead magnets or the types of ways that you're capturing leads. Obviously white papers, ebooks, webinars, things like that they have worked in the past and they work now. Probably they'll be something that's a little bit more of a focus for a lot of people at least for the coming months. So again, just keeping in mind that journey is changing, and we need to make sure that we're shifting, how you're using your marketing automation platforms to help nurture that during this time. For sure.
And you mentioned a term that some of our audience might not be familiar with, but lead magnets. Those are pieces of content that you can kind of put out there as a motivator for somebody to provide their email address or their first name, last name, or a little bit of contact information that you can then use later down the road to continue that conversation.
Right.
And you know, you say that, and I think it all points back. Look, I'm a content marketer at heart, I think, and a lot of this really points to taking a look at the content that you're producing and the content that you have at your disposal, and figuring out new and creative ways to kind of spin that up into actionable and timely and valuable things, you know, on the front end. So I think now more than ever, establishing some kind of relationship and repertoire with an individual, a user or a site visitor before they're even considered a lead. I think, you know, we've got to double down and focus on that side of the relationship right now. Dave, you know, when we talk about channel strategies like organic search and paid media and, you know, things like that, that's a good way to drive traffic. But what are some of the things that we can look at, evaluate, build upon when it comes to actually creating an experience that can turn that traffic into a contact and then into a lead?
Yeah, so I think I started to kind of briefly brush on that when I was talking about lead magnets, and that is definitely a term maybe not everybody knows, but basically using webinars or using white papers and ebooks to create to get that name into the funnel, and then using market animation to kind of nurture that. I brushed on that. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. You can have some live online events. You could potentially do podcasting or something like that, where you're capturing people. You could do something in social media. You can do direct lead gen. So you could actually create some kind of events there where you're collecting information, or you could do you know, kind of anything like that. You got to just kind of start thinking beyond the traditional things. Ebooks are also probably pretty popular these days, I think. Let me see if I had anything jotted down else besides that. Yeah, I think those are kind of the main things that I had down. There are definitely other options that you can kind of pursue. You have to get a little more creative. It probably requires a little bit more knowledge of the specific business and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to capture it. But you could do demos, you could do coupons, you could do you know, free trials, things like that. They're also good lead magnets to get people to show a little more interest and to potentially have a different kind of lead flow going through.
Awesome. Yeah, something that's kind of gotten me recently is things like online tools, things like calculators, things like estimators, or things, you know, things along those lines, that you can kind of use them interactively on the site, and then have them generate an output and have that emailed to you, for example. That's been a really effective way to get me in several brands' funnels lately. But just thinking about outside of things like just the standard download form submission or request for demo or have a salesperson contact me, thinking creatively about how you can get people's contact information, so that you can continue serving the next stages of that value promise that you make on the front end. I'm seeing some cool things start to happen there. Are there any unconventional things that you're starting to see or that you might recommend people give a try?
You know, I think there's kind of there are definitely new channels that people are pursuing a little bit more frequently now. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there with like pay-per-lead type of programs in various places. So like if you're a SaaS company, looking at things like G2 Crowd or Capterra, where maybe you've avoided them, or you've tried them and the costs are maybe potentially a little bit prohibitive, or the quality is not as good. Relooking at those as an opportunity is something. If you're more of a service-based business, there's sites like Clutch.co or Good Firms. Those are also good. They have pay-per-lead programs where you can try those out. I think another idea that's kind of been bouncing around a little bit more frequently that I've been hearing about is building out some quality affiliate programs. That's kind of it's been around forever, but it's not necessarily something everybody always thinks about. But affiliate programs are definitely a good way to kind of have a mutually beneficial kind of approach where you're able to set your cost per lead, and you can get some pretty high quality approved affiliates. So think about like Amazon. They have probably the largest affiliate program out there, but you could build something like that for your business potentially, paying on a cost per lead basis, and that could probably be a valuable thing to consider.
Hey Dave, real quick, can you tell us a little bit of what a pay per lead program exactly is, like the elevator pitch for that, and kind of how those things work?
Yeah, so a pay per lead program is basically, so say you want to pay $20 per lead, or something like that, and so basically you set that dollar amount and go to various vendors and see if you can work out an agreement to, we will pay you $20 for every lead that you send into our database, and that we're able to work. And if it's not, we'll duplicate it and all that good stuff. But basically, it's a flat fee, performance-based type of model versus some other cost per click type situation that you would do with Google AdWords or something.
Gotcha.
So you're getting the actual result, and that's what you're paying for, rather than just paying for a bunch of clicks and hoping that those convert into a lead.
That makes sense. And you're building those relationships with individual websites or network publishers, or what's that process like?
It could be a combination. In the past, when I built out affiliate programs, there's been a combination of like independent bloggers and things like that who are engaged, as well as large publishers. You could even get in with some larger publishers that are industry specific to your niche. Work out an agreement with them. A lot of times you can have unique programs details for those types of deals. And basically, what happens is you would provide all the creative and the messaging and all of that good stuff, and your partners, your affiliates that sign up would be able to dynamically leverage those and feed into your system.
Awesome. Yeah, that seems like an option that I've not heard, a whole lot of companies utilizing, at least kind of, among clients that I've worked with in the past. So it definitely could be a new source, of building some of these leads. And obviously, depending on your industry, your mileage will vary for sure. Yeah. But it also helps to know your business metrics, things like your customer acquisition value and your average lifetime value of a customer. Just knowing what it's actually, what that payoff is potentially going to be, so you can set a number. Your threshold, your appetite, your budget for what you can spend on a lead, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. And, when we talk about platform approaches, for probably, for the greater part of a couple of years now, I've really been a big fan of LinkedIn's lead gen placement option, where just in platform, as part of your ad creative, you can have a contact form built in to that call to action. So you could do things like setting up a webinar registration form and have people register right there in platform on LinkedIn without ever having to leave. And it makes it really seamless. And LinkedIn's a little more costly than, some other social platforms like Facebook. Facebook does have lead gen ads as well. I've not necessarily utilized them in the same way in the past, other than for campaigns where we're doing things like trying to build newsletter subscribers and stuff like that. But I've seen some great success in building lead gen ad campaigns on LinkedIn, because one of the cool things that placement does is it'll actually pre-populate all of the form fields with what the contact information that has been provided to LinkedIn. So, if you're like us B2B marketers who in the past maybe have done initiatives where we're trying to get people to register or sign up for a thing with a value proposition on the front end, like a give us your email address and you'll get this for free kind of thing. We know that there's a lot of people who use my first name, last name at gmail.com and just try to get the thing for free. But LinkedIn's made it to where they'll automatically populate it with the email address that they've provided to LinkedIn, which at least in some measure has been verified because they have to activate their account with that link and so on and so forth. But I've really seen a lot of great results from that placement type with a number of different clients across different industries. They're a little more costly than some of the other social placements as far as, cost per conversion goes. But if you find yourself on the service side or, in the B2B space where you've got your ultimate conversion is worth upwards of 100 or 200 or, even greater, you can kind of withstand a little bit of that average, cost per conversion and start to build out some funnels based off of cold traffic in that way. So just thinking outside of the box with some of the things that are available, now's the time to kind of experiment and, give new things a try. That can kind of be a scary concept, right? Especially now when budgets are starting to be reduced and, capacity is tighter than ever. And Dave, I know you're a big advocate of testing new things, but how can we make sure that we're testing things in a way that is, kind of has some guideposts along the way and where we can make some timely evaluations because we don't want to overreact to things whenever we just set them. But what does a good testing and evaluation plan and period look like when you are trying to implement new things like this?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I typically start with saying we probably want to set maybe like a 90-day window of testing this. So sometimes it can change. It depends on what you're doing. But as I said, generally, there's a lot of testing that goes into it. You're not going to have it right off the bat, so you need to keep that in mind. You could get some false positive or some false negative results right away, but you need to give it time to actually run so you can see trends and you can see actual performance over time in order to really make a judgment in terms of is this a good valuable channel for us to continue to use. So I would say, I mean, what I would typically guide is don't change your budgets, don't change your approach, just let us do the optimizations and work through that process for a while. It can take, I mean, when you talk about we're starting with paid search, for example, you need to give it a good 90 days to actually work through all of the optimizations that can occur at a minimum. And I think when you look at other channels, you should start with that kind of premise in mind, but you can shift if there's significant volume coming from it or something. You can probably shorten that window if you're seeing like a consistent 60 days of no performance or high performance. You can say, okay, that's good enough for us. We're gonna stop or we're gonna move forward and keep it going or whatever. So, but I think it always is very very much dependent on what you're doing, what your business is, and kind of what your appetite for testing really is. I think we definitely have seen trade shows and things like that go off the table. So we have a need to fill that void. So we'll test various things and we're trying to give it a sufficient time to really gauge if it's a valuable contribution.
Awesome. So whenever we're talking about that sort of thing, we're looking at both the traffic acquisition channel, right? So organic search, paid social, X, Y, and Z, email, affiliate. But we're also talking about performance on the website side itself, right?
Correct.
Time on page, pages per session, number of submissions of X, Y, and Z. When we're looking at some of these new programs, what are some of the key metrics you would recommend people keep an eye on on both the traffic acquisition side and on the website side once people do arrive at your landing destination?
Yeah, so like on the acquisition side, there's definitely, I mean, there's the easy things you can look at. You can look at, are you getting a solid impression volume? Also click-throughs, and so for a lot of times the best gauge you can use is click-through and click-through rate to see are the ads that we're putting out there, are they actually engaging to the point where people are willing to click through to the site, and then from there on the website side, the back end. We'll be looking at things like, what is the traffic volume? How long are they staying on the site? Are they just coming and bouncing right back off, or are they actually engaging with whatever content they're landing on? We can look at conversion rates, assuming we've set those up as goals that we want that we're tracking in analytics, so we can see some of that, like right off the bat. We can also, I mean, if you want to dig further, you can dig in and see what's the quality of those leads that are coming in, or like where are they at in the funnel, that kind of thing, and you can kind of track it through that flow. So I think you could probably set 5 to 6 kind of standard metrics that you're going to be looking at, just to measure the performance of those things.
Gotcha.
It's also important to look at like the cost, of course, and what's the cost per acquisition. That's definitely something, because you could have something where you're driving a decent amount of traffic at a high cost, and you're not really getting the conversion out of it that you need to justify the spend. So that's definitely another thing.
Gotcha. So whenever we're looking at, where we're driving people in general, do you think it's a good idea to send lead gen traffic to existing pages on your site? Are you an advocate for landing pages for campaigns? Is it a mix? If somebody's, not really, going from a let's say a sophisticated website infrastructure, and they're looking to kind of start on the right foot, what would you suggest from the, the destination perspective of lead gen?
Probably depends a little bit on what their existing landing pages look like. Generally speaking, I'd probably lean toward let's build some custom landing pages and do some testing on those pages that you can then leverage. You could leverage that information and that data to actually make adjustments on your permanent site to influence conversion from other channels. But when you're talking about testing out these new paid venues, I would definitely lean towards custom landing pages, because then you can test the various things over time, and you can actually see that performance kind of in a vacuum, rather than trying to identify what channel it's coming from and what they're doing. So that's kind of the approach that I would generally recommend. I know we don't always do that. I think that there's always opportunity for different approaches, but that's probably best case in my opinion.
Yeah, whenever we're talking about this kind of ecosystem, it's kind of an entirely different audience, right? Whenever you're running a lead gen campaign or you're running a paid traffic kind of campaign, in some circumstances where you're optimizing things on page for that campaign, it may not be changes that you necessarily want to make to your core website pages.
Yep.
Let's say you're running a lead gen campaign where ultimately you're going to serve some content, get people to read that, and then sign up for a newsletter as a response or as a result. That's a really low barrier to entry, low commitment kind of lead gen campaign. But sometimes what you'll want to do in order to encourage people to sign up might be a little more intrusive for ad traffic than your existing readers. For example, like let's say we're putting out some sponsored content on LinkedIn, and we already have a readership for our blog. We have people who come to us already and trust our information, and we're starting to drive some paid traffic to that. Well, for that paid traffic, I might want to nudge them a little bit harder to actually subscribe for the newsletter than I would for my regular readers. So things like interstitial pop-ups for newsletter signups might be something that I would consider for this ad traffic to try to get them bought in quickly. Whereas that might alienate my existing readership or things like that. And that's just one example of changes and optimizations you can make on landing pages versus your core site pages, because ultimately, your website should be your representation of you and your business, but a campaign might have a very specific goal or a very specific sub audience that you might want to consider, whenever you're driving that traffic. So I think establishing what the best course of action at the onset of a campaign like that is going to be really important. Just because it gives you a little more flexibility in what you're doing on page. Because really, driving that qualified traffic is really, only one part of this important, full big picture. And with that in mind, Dave, do you have any recommendations on where people can start if they're a really small business who is really trying to start to get some new, just leads or prospects or contacts into their ecosystem at all, where they might be strapped right now or might not have, a wide range of internal resources? What can we suggest for them?
You mean in terms of tools that they could use?
Tools, approaches, tips and tricks.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as testing, I think it's something that they can start with testing is that would be fairly simple. Is just maybe looking at something like Google Optimize, like embedding Google Optimize or embedding Optimizely, or even building out landing pages through something like Unbounce or Instapage or something like that, just as a simple starting point for landing pages. That's probably one thing that you could do pretty quickly and easily. I think probably the easiest channels to start with in terms of testing and such would be like a paid search or paid social campaigns. You could fairly easily build those things out in terms of like campaigns that you want to build and targeting. Beyond that, I think I'll assume you have some sort of CRM or email platform that you're capturing the lead information and basically just try to integrate that data together to kind of build a view of like what you're doing and how it's impacting the growth. I think that's probably the good slow starting point. Is build out custom landing pages and test that. That might be the first thing worth looking at in terms of testing out these channels.
Awesome. And to piggyback off of that, I think right now, if you're sitting in your office chair right now and thinking, man, I don't even know where to start. If you don't have a regularly recurring stream of content that you're producing, I think that's probably a really strong place to get started, because right now people are looking for they're looking for advice, they're looking for insights, they're looking for partnerships and people that they can trust. And I think on one side of the content marketing spectrum there is content curation, and there's always going to be value in that, in rebroadcasting relevant content. But I think if you're not producing content and putting things out there in your voice to your audience directly, I think that's absolutely, where you should start putting that content out there, making it prominent on your website, because it's really not in if you build it, they will come kind of scenario. I've seen lots of clients and prospects that say, look, we're producing so much content, we've got great website traffic, but we're just not getting a whole lot of traction to the blog or to X, Y, and Z. But then once I land on the home page, whenever I'm doing research, I've got to click 5-6 times to get to their blog or to get to an individual blogger content piece. And, it's not set up for success from the very beginning. So I think finding your voice and putting content out there to that audience is definitely something that we should all be considering right now. And then doing the technical things like you recommend, I think that's the other side of that puzzle piece. And just finding ways where you can start doing something, I think is absolutely going to be key. All right, guys. Well, we're coming up on time now. I hope this has been useful. I hope we've given you some ideas on things that you can start to get implemented immediately. I want to thank Dave for coming and spending some more time on his Monday with me. I know we're trying to unpack the weekend and get realigned, because who knows what this week is going to bring us, right? But thanks, Dave. I know he had to sign off, and I want to thank the rest of you guys for joining us today. I hope you found some value in this. And if you've got any other concerns, thoughts, or questions related to your marketing program, you can jump in and schedule a 30-minute marketing therapy session with a professional here at Influence. This is completely free, no strings attached. Absolutely, we're just here to help. So if you send us an email at expert@influence.com with your marketing related questions, we'll get you connected, no strings attached, with the most appropriate person here at Influence, and schedule a 30-minute session for you to pick their brain, bounce off ideas, really just kind of recenter and get some, some alignment and clear your head and get a clear course of action on your specific question. So that's absolutely available to you guys, and we're happy to do as many of these as we get submissions. The other thing that you can do is sign up for our online alerts. That's emails, that is webinars, things of that nature. And you can sign up for all of these and stay in the know by visiting the URL that you see here on your screen, more.influence.com/subscriptions. We make sure to broadcast everything that we've got coming up, including these weekly Emsights topics, our blog content, our helpful guides. All of those are going to be distributed through email and are also available on our website. So I just want to thank you guys again for joining me and spending a little bit of time with me here on a big Monday. We'll have a new session coming next Monday, and we'll be sending out the updates on subject matter and my guest here shortly. I hope you guys tune in for that one. It's sure to be a good one, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care and have a great rest of the week. Bye.